سلام دوستان عزیز، من ساسان توسلی هستم و بار دیگه افتخار اینو داریم که با دکتر نورمن گایسلر، فیلسوف معروف و معاصر جامعه مسیحی آمریکایی صحبت بکنیم درباره مسائل ایمانی و منطقی و بحث‌های فلسفی که پیش میاد در افکارمون، در مطالعاتمون. جلسه پیش درباره کتاب مقدس صحبت کردیم، رابطه کتاب مقدس با مسائل علم امروز و آیا تناقضی هست، تنشی هست بین این دو. و امروز میخوایم صحبتمون رو درباره کتاب مقدس ادامه بدیم و به خصوص روی عهد جدید میخوایم تاکید بکنیم. خیلی وقتا صحبت میشنویم که وقتی صحبت معتبر بودن کتاب مقدس میشه و ادعاهای کتاب مقدس میشه، خیلی از عزیزان میگن که کتاب مقدس تحریف شده، کتاب مقدس دست خورده، کتاب مقدس عوض شده و نمیشه به این گفته ها و این آیات اعتماد کرد. امروز با دکتر گایسلر میخوایم درباره این موضوع صحبت کنیم که آیا عهد جدید به خصوص قابل اعتبار هست، قابل اعتماد هست، مدرک معتبری هست و ادعاهایی که توی عهد جدید میبینیم یا نه. Thank you again, Dr. Geiser, for joining us. And basically, the question we want to start with is the reliability of the New Testament. As you know, many Muslims generally charge Christians with corrupting the scriptures. So whatever references we make to the Bible and the claims of Jesus in the Bible, they say, well, it's been corrupted, it's been changed. Jesus didn't say that. So as a Christian, how can you respond to these charges, to these objections that the Bible is not reliable, it's not trustworthy, and the Bible has been corrupted? Dr. Geiser, به عنوان یک مسیحی شما چطوری میتونی جواب بدی به این صحبتی که کتاب مقدس قابل اعتبار نیست، کتاب مقدس دست خورده و تحریف شده و مسیح این حرفا رو نزده، مسیح این ادعاها رو نکرده و چه جوابی به عنوان یک مسیحی ما میتونیم داشته باشیم برای این سوالات؟
Well, those who make that charge are not aware of the historical evidence because there's more historical evidence for the New Testament documents, say the Gospels of Christ, than for any event from the ancient world. There's earlier evidence, there are earlier manuscripts, more accurately copied manuscripts, more eyewitnesses, more verified testimony of eyewitness from every angle, legal, archaeological, historical, than any other event from the ancient world. That's the bottom line. That's pretty powerful. Can we support that? Well, let's take it one by one. We have, for the New Testament, more manuscripts than any other book from the ancient world. For example, most other books from the ancient world survive on the basis of 10 or 20 manuscripts. Like Tacitus and Thucydides and Herodotus and
these are ancient Greek
Homer,
historians and philosophers.
Ancient Greek historians and philosophers. We have 10 to 20 manuscripts. Homer's Iliad is the most manuscripts we have for any other book besides the Bible, 643. So that's a lot of manuscripts. The New Testament, last count, just a couple of weeks ago, because there's scholars in Germany who keep the count, we contacted them, 5,750. 5,750 New Testament manuscripts. That's more than any other book from the ancient world. Second, we have earlier manuscripts than any other book from the ancient world. Most other books from that time period, there's a 1,000-year gap between the time the book was written and the first copy. So if the book was written in, let's say, 1 AD, the book has a first manuscript in 1001 AD. So a 1,000-year gap. So a lot of changes can occur during that time period. The Bible has manuscripts that go all the way back to within 25 years of the time the book was written. Like John's books were written by 90 AD. We have the first manuscript from 115 AD, the John Ryland fragment. Then we have whole books from the Chester Beatty papyri from 200 AD and sections of the Gospel. From 250 AD, we have the Chester Beatty Papyri, which practically the whole New Testament. 325 AD, the Vaticanus manuscript, the whole of the New Testament. So we got 5,750 of these that go from 115 AD, which is only 25 years after the last book was written, right on through the next centuries. There's no book from the ancient world that has that many manuscripts that close to the original. Third, they're more accurately copied than any other book from the ancient world because we have all these manuscripts, we can compare them. For instance, if I had an audience, a class of 50 people, and I read from a piece of paper a certain paragraph, and then I burned up the original and asked them to copy as I read it, and then I collected all their copies, I could tell what the original said, because when somebody made a mistake on one letter and somebody made a mistake on another letter, where they all agreed is what the original said, and where they disagreed is where the mistakes were. So the more you have, the more you can reconstruct the original. And with 5,750 manuscripts, scholars say that you can reconstruct the original with 99 to 99.9% accuracy, depending on how you measure it. And these are all reputable scholars like Bruce Metzger, who taught at Princeton for years, or A.A. Robertson, who is the great Greek scholar. These are all reputable scholars that say from 99 to 99.9% accurately copied. Now that doesn't mean that there's any inaccuracy in the message. That's 100%, comes through 100%. And let me illustrate that. Suppose you got an email and it had one mistake in it, but it said, you have won $10 million. And there was just one mistake in it, say the U, one letter was the wrong letter. Would you pick up your money? Everybody would, right? Everybody. Now suppose you get one the next day and it's the same as the first one, except there's a mistake in a different letter. You have won $10 million, but there's a mistake in a different letter. Now the more of those you get and the more mistakes there are, the more you're sure of what the original said. Why? Because the mistakes are in different places. That's the way it is in the manuscript. So 100% of the message comes through. If you got an email that said, you've won $10 million, you got the message, right? And you're going to feel really great about it. You wouldn't say, well, there's one little mistake here. They forgot a comma or something. No, you would say, I got the message, 100% of it. Same way with the Bible. 100% of the message comes through. 99.1 or to 99.9 accuracy of reconstructing the text, 100% accuracy in conveying the message. The Bible has not been corrupted.
Now, so you went through several lines in the beginning. The number of copies, the earliest, the early dates, the reliability of the copies. You mentioned some other things too.
The accuracy of the copy.
The accuracy, okay, that's the...
and then the other thing to remember is this, that the people who wrote the Bible, the writers, were accurate writers. So we not only have an accurate copy of what they wrote, but what they wrote is an accurate representation of what happened.
How do we know that? سوال اینه که چطوری اونایی که خب شما گفتید که کپی‌های خیلی خوبی داریم که ما رو میبره به زمان رسولان مسیح در قرن اول، ولی حالا چطوری اصلا میتونیم مطمئن باشیم که نویسنده های کتاب‌های عهد جدید افراد قابل اعتمادی بودن و درست این کتاب‌ها رو درباره زندگی مسیح نوشتن؟
The way we know that is because we have more writers, earlier writers, and more accurate writers than any other book from the ancient world. We have more writers. We have 9 writers of 27 books, or 27 New Testament books, 9 writers. Just the Gospel, there are 4 writers. Well, in the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses, every word can be established in court. We have 4 writers on the life of Jesus. So we have more writers. We have earlier writers. We have contemporary writers. Now, just to show you the difference between the New Testament and, let's say, the biography of Alexander the Great, famous person from the ancient world who conquered much of the world. Alexander the Great, we know about through two biographers who lived 300 to 500 years after his time. Even the most critical scholars of the New Testament say the New Testament was written between 70 and 100 AD, overlapping with the time of the eyewitnesses. And most scholars believe that some of the books were written before 70, 50, or 60 AD. So we have books written by contemporary eyewitnesses of the fact, 9 of them, 4 in the Gospels. There is no event in the ancient world that has 9 writers who wrote 27 books who were contemporaries of the events, telling us about them. And there's no part of ancient history that any major person rejects, because there was only one person who wrote 100 years later about that because he was closest to the event, and they consider that that is authentic because of his proximity to the original cause. In addition to having more writers and earlier writers, we are able to test their writings historically. There's a noted Roman historian, Sherwin White is his name, not a believer, but who said that the New Testament documents are better documents of first century Roman history than we have from outside the New Testament. That if anyone doesn't believe these, he said, it's unbelievable, because they should accept them because we don't have nearly as much evidence. Another Roman historian named Colin Hemmer, who wrote a book, Acts in the Setting of Hellenic History, shows that of about 100 details mentioned by the author of the book of Acts, who wrote the Gospel of Luke and the book of Acts, there are 100 details, including which way the wind blew, how deep the water was, how far off the ocean, what sickness they had on that island, what is the proconsular's nickname. I mean, minute details that only an eyewitness contemporary could be. In 100 such details, he never made a mistake on a single one. In other words, Luke, who wrote Luke and the book of Acts, which is the whole history of early Christianity from the life and death of Christ through the early church, is the most accurate history we have from the ancient world. Well, Matthew and Mark said the same basic thing that Luke did, that God exists, he sent his son into this world, he lived a perfect life, he died for our sins on the cross, he rose from the dead, and he provided salvation as a free gift to all who will receive. They all have the same basic message.
A question comes up at this point, and it's become, these kinds of questions have become very popular even in the West, with novels like the Da Vinci Code, for example, that, okay, these books were written by people and they were accurately copied, but there were a lot of other gospels that were written. A lot of other people were writing things about Jesus, but the church didn't select those books. And so by chance or by political reasons, these books were put together. And so they are reliable, but we have other books that were written. And so how can we trust this to be the genuine message or the best one or the truest one? سوالی که خیلی مطرح میشه به خصوص تو دنیای امروز و حتی داستانهایی مثل رمز داوینچی که خیلی داستان معروفی هست توی دنیای امروز، فیلم ازش درست شده. این صحبت مطرح میشه که خیلی خوب این کتابا رو یه عده در قرن اول نوشتن و بعداً کلیسا اینا رو توی عهد جدید جمع کردش، ولی خیلی کسای دیگه بودن که اناجیل مختلف نوشتن و داستانهای دیگه از زندگی مسیح به ما ارائه دادن. پس ما چطوری میتونیم مطمئن باشیم که این 4 تا انجیل و این کتاب‌های عهد جدید واقعاً پیغام درست زندگی مسیح رو به ما دادن؟
First of all, most people must remember that he was writing a novel. He was not writing history.
Da Vinci Code.
The
yes.
Da Vinci Code is a novel. It's not history. He claims it's a novel and not history. Second, almost every major thing he says about Christianity or the Bible is false. Almost every major thing. I've read it carefully. I've written on the topic and lectured on it. He's wrong on all those other gospels. He said there were just the hundreds of these gospels. There were not hundreds of these gospels. There were only 4 written in the New Testament by eyewitnesses. All scholars know that. They're not even the most critical scholars believe that these other books were written in the first century by eyewitnesses. The other,
So when were they written? The other gospels we have in the history.
these other gospels were
انجیل‌های
written
دیگه‌ای
in the,
که در تاریخ اومده اونا کی نوشته شدن؟
they were written in the 2nd and 3rd centuries. They're apocryphal gospels. They're not true. For example, they claim, I, Thomas, writing this gospel of Thomas. He's already been dead 100 years. He couldn't be writing the gospel. So they know they're false. They know they're not true. They know they're apocryphal gospels, and they should not be put on the same level. First century gospels written by disciples of Jesus who knew him and lived with him are 4. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. They're all in the Bible. All the rest of these are written 100 to 200 years later by Gnostic cults that are contrary to Christian teaching that the early Christian fathers, like Irenaeus and Tertullian and Justin Martyr, wrote books condemning them, saying they're writing false things. So we know who they are, we know they're false, and they are not Christian, and they're contrary to the Bible.
What was then the basis of the church selecting these books as opposed to the other gospels? سوالی که مطرح میشه اینه که خب چرا کلیسا این چند تا انجیل رو انتخاب کرد و انجیل‌های دیگر رو انتخاب نکرد یا نوشته‌های دیگر رو واسه عهد جدید؟
The reason we know these books should be in the Bible is because they were written by apostles and prophets of God who were confirmed by acts of God, by miracles. Because if God exists, miracles are possible. And Moses, when God called him, he said, they won't believe me, and God gave him miracles. Elijah, God gave miracles. Jesus, God gave miracles. Even the Quran talks about Jesus raising people from the dead to prove that he's a true prophet. So miracles are a way to confirm the message. These books were confirmed by eyewitness prophets and apostles who could perform miracles to prove that they were of God. The 2nd and 3rd centuries were not written by apostles and prophets who did not produce miracles to prove that they were true prophets. These books claimed to be written by prophet of God, were confirmed by acts of God, told the truth about God, came with the power of God, and were accepted by the people of God. Those are the 5 criteria by which we know which books belong in the Bible. Were they written by a prophet? Could he do a miracle if he had to prove he was a prophet? Was he telling the truth about God, as we know from previous revelation? Does this book have the power of God to transform your life? And did the people collect these books and consider them sacred books? When Moses wrote, his books were put by the ark. When Joshua wrote, his books were put with Moses' book. Daniel in chapter 9 had Moses' book plus the prophets. As the books were written, the people of God recognized those characteristics in the book, and that's why we have 66 books in the Bible.
So it wasn't because a church council or Constantine decided on what books should be included or what should be the basis of the Christian faith. So it wasn't به خاطر امپراتوری روم کنستانتین یا شورای نیقیه که تصمیم گرفتن که کتابای عهد جدید چی هستش.
Constantine had nothing to do with this. All of these books were known and accepted by believers in the 1st and 2nd centuries. Constantine wasn't until 325 AD. He had the council that he did call wasn't talking about the Bible. It was talking about, is Jesus the Son of God? So it's the wrong emperor, the wrong topic, and it wasn't a close vote. The vote was 118-2, not a very close vote, and it wasn't on the topic of which book should be in the Bible. Da Vinci struck out.
Very good. متشکرم دکتر گایسلر برای این وقتی که با ما داشتید. عزیزان، امیدوارم که این صحبت‌های مفیدی بوده باشه که یه سری از سوال‌هایی که شاید داشته باشید درباره کتاب مقدس رو تونسته باشیم جواب بدیم. تا جلسه آینده، خدا نگهدار.